ובמצב הזה שבו אתה מקבל מהממשלה הזאת, שכבר הזכרתי שאתה קראת לה ממשלת המדינה היהודו-נאצית, כשאתה מקבל ממנה את הפרס הזה, האם אתה עדיין סבור, כפי שאמרת פה בתוכניתנו לפני זמן קצר, שזו מדינה בלתי דמוקרטית?
יש שני דברים בדבר. הדבר הראשון, שמאחר שאתה העלית אותו, אני צריך להתייחס אליו, אף שמעולם לא מצאתי לנחוץ להתייחס אליו. כאילו אני אמרתי, מדינה נאצית. יהודו-נאצית. יהודו-נאצי, השתמשתי בו בקשר למנטליות מסוימת הקיימת בחוגים מסוימים. יש מנטליות יהודו-נאצית בחוגים מסוימים.
היית חוזר אז בך מהביטוי הזה לכבוד האווירה הנינוחה של הפרס?
המנטליות היהודו-נאצית בחוגים מסוימים קיימת ועומדת.
יהודים ששורפים ערבים להנאתם, כמה מיליוני ערבים, פרופסור ליבוביץ', נכון? חוגים מסוימים ששאיפתם היא להקים מחנות ריכוז ולשרוף בקרמטוריום ערבים.
ידוע לי שמדינת ישראל מחזיקה במחנות ריכוז הרבה אלפים ערבים.
ומדי פעם מכניסה אותם לתאי גזים ואחר כך שורפת אותם.
אני יודע שמדינת ישראל מחזיקה במחנות ריכוז הרבה אלפים ערבים.
ואחר כך שורפת אותם. ומכניסה אותם לתאי גזים. פרופסור ליבוביץ', אתה מאשים את
דיברתי ברורה. אני יודע שמדינת ישראל מחזיקה במחנות ריכוז כמה אלפים ערבים.
ואחר כך שורפת אותם. ומכניסה אותם לתאי גזים.
זה נבואתך. זה נבואת העתיד שלך.
So I guess that's a very fitting video for what's going on today. The man is saying, like, how dare you? We're not putting people in concentration camps and we're burning them alive. And he says, that's your prophecy. And now 2024, we are, and Israelis are burning Palestinians in concentration camps alive. Your first reaction, Laith.
Look, I saw the videos from last night, and I didn't share them of the families burning alive, the patients outside the hospital connected to their IV still being burnt alive by the Zionists. And I think the reason I didn't share them is because I don't think it's going to matter. What's going to matter is actually defeating the Zionist, Nazi, Imperial hordes here. Nothing, no appeal to humanity or clear evidence of genocide and Holocaust is going to stop the West from making what we just saw last night in Gaza into a reality across not only the Arabic world, the Muslim world, but the whole planet, if they're not stopped here today. I speak many times about that we're living this moment where it's just like as if it's just before World War I and World War II, those moments of the refusal by major powers to abide by the agreed upon international laws and or the bodies, international bodies that were created to manage war and conflict. And I think one thing that people can add to this analysis is understanding that the arrival of full Nazi America, United States, begins with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And we saw, the moment of the Nazis occupying Poland is the moment of the US occupying Afghanistan, Iraq, and nobody stopped them, right? So they continued rolling. So could you imagine at the moment of the Nazis occupying Poland if the Soviets didn't fight them back, or eventually the Western powers didn't fight them back? We lived 30 years of a Nazi regime Reich expansion since the Soviet Union collapsed. And, millions of people died in swaths of lands from Latin America to the Northeast Africa, West Asia, and all of that. At this moment, it's clear after 30 years, not only after what we saw yesterday, that the only thing that's going to stop this Zionist Nazi empire is defeat. And I think we're already seeing that here on the ground, but pretty soon we will see this also on the streets of the West. It's similarly how we are seeing a revival of Palestinian resistance, which is inspiring all these movements around the world, whether it's like Arab unification coming back to fashion, or African unification coming back to fashion, and whatever it is. We will be seeing soon a return of militancy, armed militancy in the West. Those days of the 60s and 70s where Germans and Italians and Irish and Japanese come to fight on the front here in Lebanon, and to take back the fight to the streets of the West militarily, is coming also. Anyways, I know I strayed away from the beginning of the question with that video, but I feel sometimes we get all distracted with these moments.
Yeah, I found myself just left speechless, literally.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you this question as well, Laith, and feel free to not answer it if it's irrelevant or too difficult. Well, I've noticed that I find it very hard to deal with the anger and the rage. I feel an intense anger and rage when these things pass my screens. And I wonder, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the anger and the emotions?
If I was on the front or in these locations, I will carry arms and I will fight the Israelis. I am not on the front. I am not a armed person. Like, I didn't, participate in armed struggle before. So there's a million warriors here in Lebanon that are doing and will do great work. So I do my part by going out in the field and documenting the reality, bringing it to the world, because I clearly see that there is no, and that is part of, obviously, half of a war is propaganda. Half of war is propaganda. So I see myself and my work as part of the war effort. Some people would like to, lie about what they're doing and claim that they're journalists and unbiased and blah, 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 blah. No, I know exactly that I am a warrior in this battle. And clearly, there are around 200 Palestinian Lebanese journalists that have been killed since the beginning of this war, testify to the fact that they are warriors, these journalists. Okay, people in the West, they should actually act out on their rage. There's no point in just holding yourself back if you actually want an end to this genocide and the end of your complicity, not you guys watching, but speaking to me here, you're in Hong Kong, but like people that are in the West, if they want to end their complicity, they have to take action. And if that means direct action that is unarmed, destroying factories of weapons, destroying ships that are carrying weapons to Israel, destroying ports and bases that are transferring weapons and so on. These are things that somebody can do without having to carry arms. And or, which is actually a huge duty, to actually confront your state militarily. I know people are gonna say Laith is being crazy right now and is, calling for armed resistance. But I think if there is no armed resistance in the West, it's a damnation of the whole civilization of the West. And people in the West that will not carry arms against the Nazi Zionist empire that descended over them will be then just victims. And that's their choice of what is coming.
Yeah.
This reminds me a little bit of a lot of people in China I've met are interested in the idea of whether or not there'll be a civil war in the US. I've had a lot of students who are really interested that there was a movie that came out recently that, really piqued their interest. And on the topic, the answer that I give them was basically the exact same answer that John Mearsheimer gave to a Chinese a journalist who asked him the same question, like, is there a real chance of a civil war in the US? And he said, not really. And the fundamental reason is the power of state surveillance now is so great that any attempt to organize to the point where there could be factions in a US civil war would simply get crushed by the security state. And that I completely agree with. And it kind of leads me back to what you said about the importance of information warfare, the information battlefield that even US military planners will talk openly about. Like that's part of their doctrine now, is recognizing the importance of information warfare. It seems to me like when you have a security state with such, post-Orwellian surveillance powers, really the information battlefield is the only one that has a chance of making any impact. So I wonder, like, even you talk about fighting the military. Actually, it seems to me like joining the military and educating people within the military is a promising route. Educating people throughout the population and then marrying that to forms of direct action that provide or cause an immediate delay or shutdown of ports that are shipping military equipment. These are all things, and you said even earlier a few weeks ago, like a cell organization. You can't have the kind of communication and organization with a clear leadership hierarchy for the exact same reason. The security state and its surveillance powers are far too powerful. So there needs to be a kind of disaggregated or decentralized form of people with the same goal, same basic understanding, who are both educating other people and trying to get them into forms of direct action that actually stop weapons being shipped. What do you think about that? Like the chances, I guess, of that in the face of the powers of the security state?
So look, there is something to remember, that this supposed omnipotent security state is unable to defeat the Palestinian people in a extermination camp. Okay? Through their supposed intelligence prowess, right? They're not able to defeat Hezbollah on the border. Right now it's 15 days. We saw yesterday. The reason why we saw the Holocaust in Gaza being conducted live on television was because Hezbollah managed to know exactly when are all the officers of the Golani Brigade going for lunch meeting in their barracks, and sent a drone with 2 missiles and a suicide drone itself that wiped them out. It's so I think one of the main problems that the West, quote unquote, left progressive circles have, or critical versus even Mersheimer himself, is that they're defeatist. Okay, defeatist for themselves. They want to watch the Palestinians and the Lebanese people and the axis of resistance whip the empire into shape, whip the Zionists, and they want to sit down and watch this match. That's literally what they want to do, and cheer. And whenever our team, the axis of resistance, is doing great, they're all woo! And the minute the Zionist Americans achieve a tactical success, they're like, how can you fight an empire? That's not how you do revolutions. And actually, we are going to defeat the empire. It's going to be at a huge cost. And it's not going to be thanks to anything that happens in the West. It's already, the fate is written in the history books and in geography of this colonial entity and this empire of bloodletting that is called the United States. Look, there is a huge, actually, chance of civil war in the United States. And it has nothing to do with revolutionary progressives, anti-imperialists. There is a huge, huge, huge chance of it. And I tell you why. And this movie that they released, which I went and watched it, I'm like, why would they do this? It's clear it's preparing the population for what is coming. Okay, the United States does this, Hollywood does this, releases always, test balloons in Hollywood movies a couple of years before an action does. For instance, maybe people are too young, some of our viewers, but there was a movie from Eddie Murphy, one of the most racist movies he ever made, called Best Defense, and where he's an American soldier training Kuwaiti soldiers on using American tanks, and then suddenly Iraq invades. This was in the midst of the Iraq-Iran war, where Iraq is the puppy of Saddam, is the puppy of the West, and they already made it 3 years before the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq, this movie, and the United States in this movie comes and kicks Iraq out. Point is, we have been actually living this civil war in the United States now since the quote-unquote Arab Spring, what I call the Arab Autumn. Obama came to power. He wanted to produce a new Arab, a new Muslim, and endowed Turkey and Qatar with this job of bringing into power Muslim Brotherhood, or what Joseph Massad would call Islam and liberalism, kind of, like the Christian Democrats, which are the Nazis in Germany. Now we're going to have Muslim Democrats take over all the Arabic world. And in the process, freaked out, this is the liberal wing of the empire, the Democrats with these Muslim Democrats and Christian Democrats and whatever it is, then, and the other part is the conservative side, which is, the Trump, Netanyahu, Saudis, the Saudis and the Israelis were supposed to be the guardians of the area, controlling the area on behalf of the West. The Arab Autumn meant that Israel and the Saudis were going to lose power. So what did they do? They did a coup against Obama. They unleashed the Wahhabi death squads on the fields everywhere where Obama wanted to install Muslim brotherhoods. And in some areas that they couldn't release Wahhabi death squads, or had like coups again in Tunis or others, right? So we had this civil war has been going on since that day. It accumulated, or there was a peak at the end of Obama's era when he was going to give up and was going to sign a ceasefire with Russia in Syria, if our viewers remember. The Americans were going to withdraw and stop bombing Syria. And John Kerry signed this ceasefire treaty with Russia inside Syria. And the next day, within 24 hours, there was a mutiny in the American military and security services, and they bombarded the Syrian military base outside Deir ez-Zor that was holding the Wahhabi hordes at bay for 6 years and kept Deir ez-Zor city unoccupied. Okay, so, and we saw what has happened since then. The return of Obama and the conservative wing and the attempted, coup that we almost saw on January 6th and 4 years ago. And currently, the constant shootings at Trump. There is a civil war inside the United States already, inside the empire as a whole, between the liberal and conservative imperialist wings. And the focal point of this civil war between those two wings is how can you manage the apathy Arabs? That's their focal point. Okay? This is why this crazy Zionism and hate of Muslims is being pumped. Both of them are offering different ways to control the apathy Arabs and Muslims. Okay, and they're fighting over it. And as soon as the Zionist base collapses, which is going to collapse, and as soon as there is, in the next few weeks, a full-out war before the election in the US, and there's American soldiers back in coffins to the United States, and I know it's been a long answer, but as soon as that happens, do you think Kamala Harris will let the election happen? Or will she suspend the elections and call for martial law as the streets go wild when there is hundreds of American soldiers back in coffins? Okay, how will the conservative wing of the empire respond to that? Okay, let's say this doesn't happen, this scenario. The election actually happens. And one of the two candidates says, fuck it, I don't like the results. Somebody cheated, just like the last time.
Just like in France. In France, it already happened.
Yes. So what's going to happen? And these two wings, not the black people, not the Arabs, not the Chinese, not the Latinos, not the left in America, those two are two fascist groups that are armed. You have militias all around the United States. What's going to happen in the US? Okay, so we are already living a civil war being played out on the fields of the Arabic lands for the last 10 years, more. Okay, and it's coming closer and closer. We've been for 4 years and more seeing the results of this civil war coming closer and closer to the imperial capital. It just needs a spark.
Yeah, so I was actually something related to that. I wanted your opinion on that, Laith. I increasingly hear that people are predicting that, and especially now with all these young people who are pro-Palestinian and support the resistance, a lot of people are actually saying that, or a lot of people, quite some significant people, are actually saying, just watch it. The United States and the Zionists will concoct a new false flag attack. And the moment you have a false flag attack, you always get that 90% of the population suddenly stands behind the new president and the flag, and everybody is suddenly patriotic again. And I'm actually kind of scared of that. I've noticed that people can have one opinion, and then you have one false flag attack, for example, an attack by some kind of so-called extremist Muslim with some serious casualties in the United States or anywhere else. And suddenly public opinion completely sways again. What do you think about that kind of hypothesis?
Well, we go back to that situation of let me just, I think the camera just shut out for 1 second. I'm just going to fix it. All right. Well, we go back to the situation of does really matter the Western audience opinion? It doesn't. Because in a way, like just like this discussion, I'm sorry, really, honestly, for that, Peter, this long answer. But just like it is more possible that there is a fascist right-wing coup in the US or civil war on those grounds, it is definitely more realistic that people on the ground here will liberate Palestine and nothing will happen significant inside the empire in terms of resistance to the genocide and the empire. I don't have much hope in that. Okay, so, but if people want to avoid this possibility of a false flag, well, they should do a real flag operation. If you're worried about the US moving one of its Wahhabi assets to attack a school or a church or whatever it is, or public space to create more hate against Arabs and Muslims in the streets, well, then actually go and take out a base, an air base. You see, I saw like the demonstrators in Ireland this weekend shut down the Shannon airport from the outside. Well, they should have broken in and destroyed all the jets there. They should have brought with them jackhammers and destroyed all the airfields, the landing strips. That's what they should have done. So if you want to show that and avoid a false flag, you should take a radical revolutionary action that is just and make that the norm. So when somebody does a false flag, everybody knows it's a false flag immediately, because it's clear the movement for liberation, for instance, in Ireland is taking just direct action and or armed action, just ones. Like how Hezbollah keeps on hitting the Israeli bases, so it's so many of them that whenever the Israelis try to claim that Hezbollah is attacking civilians, everybody's like, shut the hell up. We've all watched like 100 bases being bombarded. So that's the only cure for that. But sitting on your couch and doing nothing is just actually preparing you for a false flag.
Yeah, I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility, Kareem, like your hypothesis. I think, Laith, your idea about if U.S. soldiers are drawn in and they're actually put into combat, that I could see leading to potentially something like a civil war, not a metaphorical civil war like, the level of political polarization in the U.S., but if you have actual soldiers who are trained and organized, that's something that leftists in the US, like there isn't even really the left. It's just a bunch of disorganized, disaggregated leftists that oftentimes, spend a lot of their time just arguing with each other. I could definitely see within the military, if there's a great deal of dissent as a result of being shipped off to fight Netanyahu and his extreme, crazy right-wing religious fanatic and crackpot realist government, that I could see potentially being the seed of a serious conflict approaching a civil war. But when it comes to like the right-wing militias, I mean, they're the only ones with any degree of organization in the US. And even they are completely infiltrated and surveilled. I don't even see them as really being capable of doing anything that they want to do. But if you have a bunch of people in the military, like a whole bunch of Smedley butlers awakening to the fact that they've been used as cannon fodder for someone else's interests, that's another story altogether.
Yeah, veterans or something. Some veterans who are traumatized, and you see more and more of those. I must say. But I also must say there's just something that I also noticed. The Western left, forget about them, because the Western left, first of all, they only listen to each other. And second of all, they don't know how to do internationalism or how to bind across racial lines. That's one of the biggest problems of the Western left. They only listen to other white guys, and they have no idea how to do some cross race and cross country collaboration. I coincidentally just wrote an article about that on my Substack about that that there will be no magic Westerner saving us. You know what I mean? And that actually brings me to something that I wanted to talk to you about, Laith. It's a bit we're shifting gears here a little bit, but it's something that I find personally very disturbing, and it's a more of a psychological aspect of the fight against imperialism. And you often highlight white supremacy as a central aspect of imperialism, and I agree with you. I think that's one of the major issues that we are dealing with today, also in the global South. And I noticed that white supremacy is, of course, not only a problem in the West. For example, Western leftists who only listen to other white people, who hardly do international collaboration, no binding with resistance groups in the world. In fact, most Western leftists will still call organizations like Hezbollah or Hamas as terrorists. I mean, you cannot really rely on them, and because they are just so conditioned by imperial propaganda. But I noticed that white supremacy is also a very big problem in the global South. I've lived in Malaysia, I've lived here in China, of course, especially Hong Kong, formerly colonized. And white supremacy is one hell of a propaganda machine, man. And I noticed something that really disturbs me, and I want your perspective on that as somebody who lives in West Asia. I notice when I scroll social media posts, for example, of people posting Palestinian children, for example, this is blah 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 blah, she needs your help, or this person just was eliminated by Israel. And I noticed that the overwhelming majority of these pictures and videos are often of the lightest skin, most white-looking Arabs. And first I thought I should not focus on this, ignore it, but it became so blatantly obvious that I almost started to think cynically, like it seems that Israeli bombs only attack light-skinned Arabs and that the dark ones are avoided by the bombs or something. Even though, of course, this is ridiculous bullshit, but I just never see the victims. How do you observe that as somebody in West Asia? What's going on here? Is white supremacy a big deal over there? I'm really disturbed by this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the whole planet has been absorbing Hollywood propaganda for 60 somewhat years en masse. And it's been the dominant, media in the world. And of course, many peoples in Africa, Asia, and Latin America have internalized white supremacy, whether through the defeatism of actually thinking that, wow, the Israelis are like chosen people, they're the best at everything, and you can't fight them, or the America is so powerful, just give up, do what they want and you can get a job and you're good. And obviously there's been a lot of conditioning, specifically, like I think since Oslo, when we talk about the Palestinian struggle and looking at those videos that you're saying, which I did notice also the same thing. And this is partially, you'll see, like Free Palestine TV doesn't share these videos in general, doesn't play this emotional game. I'm not here to win the favor of white man in Europe or the US to actually acknowledge my humanity. So there was a whole, I think, class of people that got conditioned to supposedly how to speak to white man. Okay, they've been told for decades now that, you know, if only you can convince the majority of Canadians and Brits and Americans that there's a genocide, that Palestinians are humans, you can get your freedom, right? So all these people, and I have refused all my life, and this is part of why I been a target forever, because I refuse to speak in the cadence or the language limitations that are set on me by these supposed, propaganda rules that I have to play in when I'm speaking to the West. And this is also why I get more people listening to me, because nobody wants to listen to a crying baby, number one. Okay. And this is what pisses off the Zionists. So I'm against this. It is really derogatory and demeaning to the Palestinians when somebody does this, purposefully share lighter skinned or lighter haired color Palestinian kids or families or whatever, or blue-eyed and so on. Although, by the way, the first blue eyes in the world and the first blondes were from greater Syria region and walked up to Europe. You know, it's not that we are diverse because we're not a race, we're a culture based on language and common. Anyways, I strayed again there in a circle for you, but I hope it gave you an answer.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I always say, Laith, and I focus on this a lot as a social psychologist. I also do a lot of research on this. You know, that kind of internalized white supremacy you see among non-white people classified as non-white around the world. It's fucking disturbing to me. I hate it. And I just noticed that, and I want your opinion on this. How do you feel about this? I always say that you can fight and you can be angry all you want, as long as you feel that you have to look like your colonizer to be worthy. As long as you think that when you look like your colonizer, then you're attractive. You're never gonna get equality. Seriously, you can say, oh, we are a great culture and we have this and that and we have a rich history. But if you want to look like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person, and you openly admit that that is your ideal image, you will never get equality, ever. Forget about equality. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And look at me. I mean, I could shave and look 20 years younger. Nobody will see all these gray hairs, and but I could put on a suit and tie. Although I've never put a tie on, I feel they're like a leash on a dog that you're supposed to limit yourself. You see, civility. You have to. So. No, it's clear that it is irrelevant, honest to God, the opinions of the West. The reason I speak in English to not only you and all these other people in this is that, first off, I speak the same way I speak to my own people. Okay, what's important here right now is what our people believe in themselves. And I think we have now convinced enough people within our region here of their self-worth, and that they can take on the Zionist monster and the empire behind it and defeat it And there's enough people that believe that now. And that's it. So the reason I speak in this, in English only, it's not because I believe I can convince a majority of white people to actually carry arms against their state and fight the imperialist Zionists. Because it's because I want to show my diaspora communities and my communities here that we can speak in this way and refuse the limitations of the debate being imposed on us and actually achieve reaching the audience and winning the propaganda war without compromises. Peter, we've you've been trying to ask me a question.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about this tension that maybe it's non-existent, but it seems like there's a tension between believing in the importance of information warfare, but then also believing the public opinion in the imperial center in the U.S. or also its allies in Europe is irrelevant. Like, what's the resolution of that tension in your mind, or is there not a tension?
Yeah, the resolution in my mind is, on the one hand, every time I speak this way, it's demoralizing for the Zionists, the hardcore. Okay, so you see them how, for instance, when they see videos of me speaking, they reply with like, "Where's your pager?" Something like that. Okay, so it means it's triggering to them. It is making those hardcore fascists question their own virility and ability to crush this uppity Arab. Okay, so that's actually the number one most significant thing that we can do, is demoralize the Zionist hardcore. Okay, the other thing is that revolutions are not fought with tens of thousands of people as they start. They start with a little core. If what I'm saying radicalizes 10 people in the United States to do something, that actually is significant enough to cripple a state. All you need is and trigger something. Even if there is at one point only a few hundred armed revolutionaries inside, let's say, Canada, that will take down a whole state. Honestly, people don't understand how important it is and significant. The Canadian government would have to. The last time they had an armed confrontation in Canada was in 1995. The Canadian military was deployed on Canadian territory against 7 Indigenous warriors in what is called British Columbia, from the Shishwitmik Nation. 7 armed warriors, Indigenous warriors, faced off the largest military deployment on Canadian soil in history. 7,000 troops with armored APC carriers and helicopters and landmines and rockets, and they fired on them 77,000 rounds of ammunition. And those 7 people kept the Canadian military in a standstill for 8 months. So can you imagine if there is another 10 people that have a military confrontation with the Canadian state on Canadian territory right now, what it would mean to the Canadian deployments in our region here, or the flow of munitions and weapons from Canada, if they have to fire another 100,000 rounds of ammunition on 10 people in Canada, in the middle of the forest, and have to deploy all their military and intelligence and surveillance and so on to fight a few warriors in the forest. That alone lifts the weight off the Palestinian people. It's significant enough to make a huge dent. Let the imperial hordes be pulled back to fight on their own territory. And I think this is coming. Not only because of me, I'm preaching this. It's clear that we are back to this moment that there will be internationalist brigades being born. There will be people coming to Lebanon, to Algeria, to Cuba, to Venezuela, to Bolivia to train and carry arms. And they will be taking action. A window, I don't know how long it's going to take for these things to be birthed, but it's happening, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, I am talking about uppity Arabs. I know. Growing up in the Netherlands, there's nothing that many Westerners dislike more than an uppity Arab. Believe me, at least in Western Europe. I think in North America there's and particularly in the United States they also have a big problem with uppity black people. But in the Netherlands, the Arab is really the worst thing especially an uppity one. And we had a very interesting guy when I was in my 20s, and maybe even in my teenage years. He was also a Lebanese guy. And he was always on our television. His name is Diab Abu Jaja. Do you know Diab Abu Jaja? Have you ever heard of him? Okay, you can try and search him on Twitter, Diab Abu Jaja, and he is now actually compiling evidence against 1,000 Zionist soldiers with that organization. What's the name of that organization? The Hint Rajab organization or something. That's him. He is doing that.
Nice.
And he actually started when I was a young guy called the Arab European League. And why did he do that? Because in Belgium and the Netherlands, he noticed that Arabs are the most stigmatized groups of people that they're walking around in Western Europe. And he became a phenomenon. And what happened, of course, is he was stigmatized. He was a terrorist and this and that and an extremist, because if you're an uppity Arab, you're automatically a terrorist and everybody believes the media. But what was interesting about him, and I've tried to also get him on the show. I've emailed to his website. Let's hope he will one day come on. What's interesting about him, Laith, and you just said that, is that he did not play by the rules of the Belgian and the Dutch media people, interviewers. So he would go on shows and he would debate them under the table. Like I told Peter, he was like an Arab Malcolm X in Western Europe. And it was so interesting to see, because you could see the rage in those white interviewers. You could see the frustration and the rage, because he was literally too intelligent and too sharp to win the debate. And I think these people, and I count you among those people as well, Laith. I think these people are so crucial, not just for the West to finally see their own stupidity, but I think also for people in West Asia, Global South in general, to see that, hey, wait a minute, where's there's some self-worth. You know what I mean? Like the self-worth of Arabs and people in general, of marginalized people in general, has been so beaten up by Hollywood and propaganda that now when you see that suddenly all these images coming out that actually gives people self-worth, I think that is so tremendously powerful in changing the whole this whole inequality that we see. Now I talk a lot, but I don't know if you have anything to say about that, Laith.
Yeah. Look, I am the highest visibility Palestinian, highest visibility Syrian, highest visibility Arab in all of Canada. And I have been, denied any space on any of the mainstream media in Canada since 2009, 2010. So there's clearly, I'm on a blacklist that is not allowed, because every time I went on air, I destroyed them, right? So they all, and it seems like this blacklist is hereditary. They pass it on from one generation to another in the administrative staff of the major media outlets in Canada. So when the Zionists, for instance, launched this campaign against me two and a half years now ago, in Canada to defund the Community Media Advocacy Center that I worked with, I was not invited. They published 3,000 media segments in print, radio, and television to attack me, and the Prime Minister denigrated me and defamed me and libeled me 8 times on live broadcast and inside the Parliament. The Parliamentary Committee of Heritage had, I think, 12 meetings, okay, all broadcasted, and none of those was I ever invited to speak for myself or defend myself. So you could imagine the mass control that is needed in such a situation. Not one media outlet dares interview me about attacks about me. Not one parliamentarian dares invite me to the parliamentary hearings about me. Not one. So there is sometimes in situations like you were talking about the Netherlands, correct? Because the Netherlands is not a homogeneous society, meaning there's not one elite with one language and one cultural group. Netherlands has, you got the Flemish and you've got the Germanic, right? Peoples.
No, that's Belgium. Belgium has the Dutch language and the French language. In the Netherlands, we only have the Dutch elite, like one of the most powerful royal families, the Bilderberg group people.
Yes.
Terrible.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm mixing up my Germanic.
Oh, no problem.
Colonizers.
That doesn't matter.
Shit. All of those Germans look the same to me.
Well, actually, our royal family is mostly Germanic, of German blood,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm just making these jokes, but obviously it's one culture, Germanic culture, the Danish, the Dutch, the Germans. Anyways, but so look, you do have a high percentage. I think one of the highest percentage of diversity, right? In terms of
we have 17 million people, and I think more than 1 million are Muslims. So that is 1 out of 17 people, you could say, are Muslims.
But racialized,
most of them are Moroccan.
In general, racialized, it's even higher. Like in France, it's 30 some odd percent racialized, not meaning non quote unquote white, or not French.
No, in the Netherlands, it's approximately 6%. I think is non-white, classified as non-white. But it sounds little, 6%. But I mean, if you go to any big city, it's very, very mixed, very diverse.
Well, then maybe it's because they feel so comfortable in their majority that they can bring some uppity Arab on there. In Canada, we're talking about 30 some odd percent non-French, non-English citizens, with like 22 or 23% racialized and 5 or 7% indigenous. So it's becoming more necessary to kind of control, I think, the discussion space. They're too scared that my opinions, once you reach a point of like 10% of the population it could be revolutionary, you're screwed as a state. Okay, so a place like Canada that has 30+% that are non-white, it's very possible that there could be race revolutions or race riots. So they're getting more controlled, the spaces there.
Well, Laith, if you want to be invited to the Canadian Parliament, you need to have fought for the SS.
Yeah,
standing ovation.
Yes. And it's so
I just looked it up.
hilarious.
If I can jump just for a bit, actually, it was closer to what you said, Laith. We are now already at 20% non-white immigrants, and 6% are from the EU. So in total, 26%, you could say 25% immigrants. Of those, 5% are from the EU. So these are whites. So you could say 20% are Moroccan, Turkish, Suriname, formerly enslaved Dutch black people.
And so forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't they call them all, like, even if their families have been living in the Netherlands for generations, they have some term you introduced me to, like,
The Netherlands is it was not surprising that the Dutch were the most efficient deporters of the Jews during the Second World War. Most proportionally, most Jews had been shipped out of the Netherlands. Why? Because the Netherlands has the most efficient racialized archival system of its population till today. And that means that if your great grandmother was an immigrant, you are still a fourth generation immigrant. You're still called a fourth generation immigrant. Somebody like me with a white Dutch mother and an Algerian father, even me, I'm still called a second generation immigrant. If I would get children, there's still third generation immigrants and then fourth generation immigrants. And that's the Netherlands, man. That's the Netherlands for you.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just shared the screen of Abu Jaja. Did you see it, Laith?
Yes. And I realized that I'm actually following him.
I saw you following him. I was like, hey, wait a minute. He knows him probably.
Yeah.
But anyway,
no, I'm just so bad with names sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, fascinating guy. He's never sitting still. He's always fighting for the rights of Arabs, and now he's compiling like this big dossier of thousands of soldiers with all the crimes that they did, and they're going to sue them. They're going to sue them in their respective countries, and I think that this is good stuff because many of them are double nationality Westerners, and they have to come home. Good luck.
Oh yes, and this should be the norm everywhere in the West. There's thousands of Canadians, Brits, French, Americans, others that are right now fighting in Gaza and in Lebanon. You know what I was when I started looking at his work specifically on this file, I thought to myself, the priority should be for the pilots, and not only the Israeli pilots that are flying these, because the majority of the war crimes are being committed from the air. Okay. It's also the British, American, French, and other pilots that are currently right now manning the F-35s that the US just delivered because the Israelis didn't have enough pilots to fly them. So if priority is given to track and lift the veil off the names of these pilots, because this is a secret. One of the biggest secrets is finding the names of pilots in the Israeli Air Force and or American and other air forces. If we can lift that veil and name them alone, the beginning of this process will threaten the continuation of this war, and it will become a state national security issue. At this moment, these little soldiers, foot soldiers on the ground that are raping and pillaging and killing, destroying homes, they're replaceable, very easily replaceable. But the pilots, that's very hard to replace.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder what the legal strategy is, though, by this organization, because at least in U.S. law, private citizens can't push forward any sort of criminal action. They can only use tort law. Like if you're harmed or a relative is harmed, then you've got a case in tort, but you've got to push the state to actually enforce criminal law. And doing that in the U.S. is hard to imagine, but perhaps in some other countries that he's looking at, the legal system works somewhat differently, and there's a chance of getting the state to actually fulfill its obligations under international law and perhaps even domestic law.
Yeah, you see, look, I know exactly the laws that he's using because we did try using them here before. And so you have the Rome Statute that was adopted by different countries into their criminal codes. Okay, Canada was the first country in the West to adopt the Rome Statute as part of the criminal code. So war crimes and crimes against humanity could be prosecuted on Canadian soil for being committed somewhere else by somebody even not Canadian. But most of those countries that adopted the Rome Statute as part of their criminal code in the West were all trying to just do it for show. So what they to kind of block citizens and or lawyers from initiating proceedings under the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Acts within their criminal code of those countries, they put in those code that the authority to charge and initiate proceedings in court for under the Rome Statute is endowed only in the hands of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. Okay, so in Canada, for instance, in 2002, when Netanyahu attempted to speak at Concordia University in Montreal, and we shut down the event. Before we did that, we tried to initiate, I'm sorry, there's some bombing sound. We tried to initiate, war crimes and crimes against humanity charges. And the Attorney General, being a Zionist, who's the Minister of Justice at the time, Erwin Cutler, he's one of the most famous Zionists in the world, actually. He refused to. So there's nothing we could do within the legal system. So we issued a citizen's arrest warrant and said, we are going to arrest this guy. And, we had a huge battle. And although we're not able to arrest him, he couldn't speak in Montreal, Netanyahu. So the Netherlands is unique out of all those Western states that adopted the Rome Statute because they didn't put that block, that political manipulation filter of endowing only the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice to initiate those proceedings. So you have a chance in the Netherlands to actually go to court, put the accusations in front of a judge, and the judge making a decision, can they initiate proceedings under the Rome Statute or not? And I think the Zionists are lobbying inside the Netherlands now for more than a decade to add that filter into the crimes statute that they have there, and with that pressure, although they haven't won yet that ability, what they want in the Zionists, that pressure itself was put on judges in the Netherlands many times when there was charges being asked for when Israeli generals or others were visiting, and we saw how that played out in the courts in the Netherlands.
Right. And about those pilots, I think you make a very good point. We were actually going to talk to Matt Kennard about that of Declassified UK. So he was going to come on. So we were trying to get a time to talk about this, and then suddenly he started ghosting us. We never heard from him again. So we were thinking maybe one of our recent guests. He's like, or our recent interviews. He's like, oh no, that's not my thing or something. But we never heard from that guy again. Too bad, because I think he's doing good work on exposing the British in what they're doing in West Asia. And I think it's not only the British. I think it's a lot of people over there. Laith, can we ask you one last question?
Sure.
So I heard you say on on an interview with a guy. I don't know his name, but it's the Canada Files. It's a very very funny guy in my opinion. I like the guy. He's unique. I like it.
Aiden is great.
Aiden,
yes.
yeah. And I'm like, that's good. The new generation people like this guy make me optimistic. But I heard you say something very powerful and very that was quite of a statement. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask Laith about this. You said, believe me, in 1 year the Zionist state will not exist anymore. And do you still believe that? And why do you think that?
Yes, I do believe it 100%. Because we right now have already seen the defeat of the Zionist ground forces, both in Gaza and now more so even in the south of Lebanon. We have seen the defeat of the air defense systems of the Zionists by the Iraqi, Lebanese, Yemeni, and Iranian space force, whatever, missile and space force. There's nothing left right now in front of the Zionist colony except this direct regional war where the US will fight it on their behalf. And so we will see ourselves in this regional war, and the United States military in Western Asia will have the same fate as the Israeli military. There's nothing better it can do. Especially that the Americans and the West themselves have been telling us that the best army in the world and the best intelligence and the best special forces and special air defenses and everything is the Israelis, and they're the chosen people. So can you imagine the non-chosen people army of the US? Can it do better than the Israelis? According to them, the Israelis are better than them. So not according to me, right? So a year of slaughter will commence soon, but it will only end with the non-existence of the Zionist colony and the exit of American forces here. Either that or a nuclear war that engulfs the whole planet, and also Palestine will be free and there will be no more Israel. So in any case, either we all die and there's no more Israel, or the West doesn't use nuclear weapons and is defeated in the region and exits completely humiliated, and the fucking colony packs up and leaves, and we see them leaving like the Crusaders. There's no third reality. And this war, because of how, although the Axis of Resistance has been attempting for a long time to keep it as a slow cooking war, because the West and Israel are insisting for it to be as fast and as dramatic and as possible, they are going to end it within a year.
Yeah, I can definitely see the pressure on the US building to a point where they have to find some, they'll call it something like, what do they call it in Vietnam? Peace with honor, some kind of face-saving device. But I can very readily see the costs adding up, political costs, military costs, economic costs, to the point where they cut their losses and then make up a face-saving tagline to market it with. Well,
yeah, or nuclear holocaust. That's the only option.
That's quite possible.
Yeah, it's still baffling how far they have let it go, though. I mean, this already has cost so much. I'm not even only talking about their moral image. I'm also talking about the business community, you name it. I mean, this is so incredibly bad for the U.S. empire, in my opinion. It's baffling how far they let it go. But apparently, the American empire thinks that it's more beneficial to just wipe out all Arabs in the neighborhood of Israel than to make them stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Laith. Stay safe over there.
Indeed.
And we are going to see you soon, hopefully.
Hopefully, inshallah. Talk to you soon, guys.
All right. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.